What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at SoundHound AI stock, ticker symbol SOUN, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, March 22nd. Alright guys, SoundHound stock here today down $1.25 a share. That's minus 15.76% in regular trading hours. It is down about another 30 cents or so in the after hours, but listen, as always, you guys will hear me say this a lot. With after hours movement, you have to take it with a grain of salt. We saw a little bit more volume than is typical here in the after hours, but it dropped off so quickly, and anytime volume is not consistently matching intraday or exceeding intraday in the after hours, I mean, these stocks get bullied. These stocks can get pumped easily as well in the after hours, and you just have to take it with a grain of salt, whether it's confirming your bias or going against you. But let's get started here on SoundHound with our daily ritual, our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart, and try to pull out any hidden bias that isn't, so easily seen simply by looking at the price action. Now, it was a 15.76% down day, again, at least in regular hours. But what we can actually do is peel back a layer of the onion and take a look at the volume profile. I just happen to like using the 5-minute. I need 3 things, though, to pull out some hidden bias. I need big changes in volume. I need those to correlate with big obvious moves in stock price. And I need the volume on those to be out of context compared to what is typically expected that time of day. So let's circle up some moves that I'm interested in here. I want to look at this pop and drop. Okay. I want to look at this breakdown. We will include that consolidation, but I won't circle it. This breakdown, and then this recovery as well. We got kind of a fade back upside. And then this move into the close. A few different things to look at here today. Let's start left to right as is typical. Now, the opening bar, if we zoom out and compare to yesterday, it was higher than yesterday. However, today, it was actually not even one of the highest volume bars, which is, a little bit more common on a stock like SoundHound than maybe a stock like Nvidia, for example. But still, I think most of the time, even on a stock like SoundHound, we're going to see that U-shape that is so typical of, especially in blue chips, with the close being a little bit lower than the open. Today, though, we're seeing all over the place in terms of volume. Now, on this pop and drop, it happened so quick, and what was interesting about the drop portion, because the pop, it doesn't really give us an opportunity to really confirm any bias or see any hidden bias, because it took place over one bar, right? But the fade that we got, it was interesting because we didn't really see out of context volume as far as out of context compared to the pop, right? But we also saw that fade broken up by just a randomly extremely low volume candle, comparatively speaking. And then volume just fades off really, really quickly. So, I mean, the truth is, on that first move, we're really not seeing any bearish bias, or I guess bullish bias for that matter, at all. Now, on these moves here, these are really interesting because what I would expect to see looking at this without even pulling up the volume profile is increasing red volume, consistently high red volume, and then it starts to fade, right? But we just got big pop and fades. We didn't see consistently increasing. It was very contextual up until that, 12:15 Central Time candle when things really started to move downside. And you guys know, for me, I need 3 at least candles, consecutive candles that are out of context. Otherwise, we're dealing with a fooled by randomness risk, at least on the volume profile specifically. And then, also on that kind of like temporary bottoming candle that we had, that green bar with the wick, we saw big volume on that as well. Granted, it was probably a battle candle, but there's just nothing there. This one as well, very similar thing, big pop and fade. There's nothing there. Now, here on this recovery, there's nothing there, right? It's very contextual. This is surprising me already. However, as we head into the close, it's normal to see an increase in volume into the close, but it started a bit early than might be contextual here on SoundHound today. So there's where we start to get, you know, finally, what seems like finally, given the end result today, that bearish bias. But I got to be honest with you guys, I was expecting to see a lot more on a 15% down day. The truth is, the bearish bias, it didn't really present itself all that much, at least in an obvious manner that I would be comfortable acknowledging until kind of we headed into the close with those, what is that, 7 consecutive red bars, getting a little bit out of context a little early. So I'm actually quite surprised by this volume profile here today on SoundHound. But let's move on to the 30-minute chart and start taking a look at those self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels and scenarios that I'm looking at come tomorrow. Now, here on the 30-minute, I'm looking at the most popular, just because of that self-fulfilling prophecy mentality, indicators that you could possibly slap on a chart. The 30-minute's a very popular chart, so I'm using the 50 period and the 200 period. The 50 period is the white line, the 200 is the gray. Now, we did break down off of that test on both of these, really. We tested both of them off the open and rejected and broke downside here on the 30-minute. Now, that 50 period is starting to curl over. Bulls, understand here that we currently find ourselves approximately 20% now away from that 50 period back to the upside. I do expect that 50 period to continue to fall into tomorrow, so that 20% need to make a retest of that is likely to become a smaller number into tomorrow, assuming the stock were to, you know, stay flat with that moving average continuing downside. Of course, we don't know how the stock's going to open, but when a moving average like that has momentum, it typically continues until the stock forces it to change direction. So bulls, I think I'm at a point now where I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I want as few psychological barriers back upside as possible, okay? Which means that, contrary to what I might typically say in a 30-minute setting like this, I actually wouldn't mind seeing that 50 period just tank off to the downside, because it opens up an opportunity for the stock to reclaim it more quickly, okay? Assuming that the stock can be strong enough to reclaim that 50 period on big volume, see a low volume retest, and then boom, a high volume bounce away from the 50 period and just put some distance in between the descending still 50 period, which in that case it would then have to flatten out and curl back upside. I actually wouldn't mind that, because it gives the stock a win, you know, after a rather substantial red day. A stock like this needs a win, and quickly, okay? And that could present that opportunity. So that's actually a little bit of a different take than most days on the 30-minute, but that's kind of really what I'm looking at here. Remember, this is just all psychology, and when you have a bigger day in either direction, the opposite side needs to book a win as soon as possible. Now, let's move on here to the 4-hour chart and take a look. You can see here that we also broke down through the 50 period here on the 4-hour chart, okay? So what I'm really looking at here on the 4-hour is I'm just considering the distance between, again, this is the after hours price, take that with a grain of salt. It's about 20% away, back to the upside. You know, the 4-hour is a much slower moving chart. Well, more so the 50 period on the 4-hour is a slower moving average. I do expect this to flatten out. So the 4-hour is just really simple. I mean, there's not a lot to go over specific to the 4-hour, but just heading back toward that 50 period, and then the 50 period on the 4-hour becomes a lot more in play, and bulls can look to reclaim that. But I'm not expecting any big moves out of the 4-hour in terms of like scenarios to lay out here, just because it's very slow. But just understanding that I'm always watching the 4-hour, it never completely drops off my radar. But bulls, that's kind of what I'm watching here mostly, is that 50 period here on the 4-hour chart. The 200 period is sitting at about 450. So bulls, understand that you're going to have a lot of bears as they check in with the 4-hour. The only thing that is very obvious on this chart is that 200 at 450. So bulls, just understand that other side. Those bears are likely thinking 450 is at least one of their numbers. And I know it's uncomfortable to look at the other side, but you have to consider it arguably more so than your own side. I mean, you know why you're in the trade, right? If you're long, you know why you're there. Do the uncomfortable work and look at the other side's thesis and understand. It'll help you understand your own trade even better. Which brings us to the real story heading into tomorrow now, okay, on the daily chart. Guys, the daily's not going to show after hours movement, so understand currently the stock is really at about 640, at least at the time of this recording. We closed at 668, okay? So the obvious, most simple story, that's the story that I want to pay the closest attention to, because that's the one that's going to have the most eyeballs, okay? Here's what I'm watching tomorrow. I'm watching two very specific things. I'm watching 6, and I'm watching 7. When a stock is priced under 10, like SoundHound currently is, each round number is a massive psychological level. It's huge. And we know that SoundHound is a volatile name, so both 6 and 7 are well within a reasonable one-day move here on SoundHound stock. So listen, bulls, if we see a downside test to 6, ideally we don't want to give that up, because that opens up a test of an even bigger level for the bears potentially, which is 5. 5 is a really big level, okay? 6 is kind of like the last frontier in front of 5 to hold the stock off. So any downside test to 6, going to want to see that hold on big volume, okay? Bulls, the eyes tomorrow, though, are ideally set on a reclaim of 7 to kind of show, okay, today was a bit of an overreach to the downside. Get a little bounce out of that hole, reclaim that whole dollar of 7, and kind of use that as like a tabletop to reset on. All right, get above 7 on big volume, any retest, lower volume ideally, and then the pull away from 7 on big volume to confirm, yep, we're reclaiming 7, at least in the short term. Bears, really simple for you guys. Any upside test to 7, you want to see a hard high volume rejection, and your big goal tomorrow, if you're a bear, crack down below 6, big volume, make the retest on low volume, and reject hard on higher volume to confirm 6 as a short-term resistance. Bears, success in doing that tomorrow could open you guys up for a future downside test of 5. Bulls, success in claiming 7 tomorrow could open us up for a retest of 8. Of course, doesn't all have to happen in one day. That's the mentality here. All right. Now, bias. What was the actual bias out of options traders today? See, this is really interesting because it's a 15% downside day. We have 210,000 total contracts traded. That's a little more than we've seen as of late. That's a decent sample size. And we had almost 134,000 calls and almost 77,000 puts. We're still seeing relatively heavy call side bias even on a big red day. The short-term speculators, look at this. The delta range, 0 to 20. Those are those short-term bets being placed. 18,500 calls and just over 13,000 puts. So even on a day like today, we're still seeing that short-term call side bias and the overall call side bias as well. I mean, it's very interesting here. Listen, guys, if you're looking to get grandfathered in to the Roensch Capital Gold server, that's where I'm sending out my personal scalp setup alerts every day, in-play stock alerts, swing trade setup alerts, my own as they come. Unusual options activity, I human verify every single alert that goes out. Also, of course, every day working with my Platinum one-on-one members. If you want to get grandfathered into that and be immune to future price raises, that link in the pinned comment will allow you to do so. Hope to see you join for tomorrow's trading day, and I'll see you in the next one.